Okay, hey everybody, we're going to do this question together. I thought this would be a good one because it combines a lot of things that we want to do here and kind of nails down all the little bits of stuff we were talking about today during the after-school stuff. So let's look at this question. Avon drops a ball off the top of a 10-foot pool slide, and the ball follows the projectile h of t equals negative 16t squared plus 6. Okay. T is the time in seconds, and h is the height of the ball. So as you can see here, I've taken the time to graph the entire equation. I know that my y-axis is the h, the height, and my x-axis is the t. So now I'm dealing with h's and t's. Doesn't matter, same thing. H and x and y, h and t. It's all right. Now her friend Riley needs to catch the ball between 2 and 5 feet off the top of the water. So between what 2 times should Riley try to catch the ball? Now, in this case, you would actually have an easier time just solving this like it was a quadratic equation, because really, what are you trying to do? You're trying to find out what the t is for this height right there and this height. So I'm looking for the area, where is the times for this point and this point. In other words, what is the time for when the height is 5 feet, and what is the time when the height is 2 feet? And then I just say, well, it's between that. That's pretty easy. And of course I ignore the left side because, well, there's no such thing as negative time. So this is one of those situations where reality has to change the way I look at that equation. It always comes up that way. But instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to look at that as a set of inequalities, and I'm going to show you how we go about doing that. So really what I'm trying to do here is I'm creating essentially 2 equations. There's 2 equations here. In one case, I want to know when this thing, this negative 16t squared plus 6, when is that less than 5? And at the same time, I also want to know when is that greater than 2. Same equation, of course. So really, I'm looking at finding solutions to 2 inequalities. So this is going to take a little bit of doing, but I think we're going to be okay. So why don't we take those, and now obviously I have to solve for both. And I've got to figure out what I'm going to have to do. Let's just get rid of that, get rid of that. What I'm going to have to do to solve each one in turn. So let's look at each one at a time. So, let's see, this guy goes over here. This guy goes over here, and we're going to start off with the 5. Okay, so let's look at that. Well, first things first, I'm going to move that 5 over because I don't like it there. So, I'm going to move it over, and I'm going to end up with a 0 is greater than negative 16t squared, and that's 5 off of 6, so I got 1. Now you'll recall today that I actually was talking about the negative, and we were wondering, what do we do when we got a negative there? How does that work? And I'd like to look more into that, because one of the things I didn't talk about is that why not just leave the negative there? Leave the negative there. In other words, but not so much leave it there, take it out, factor it out, but don't do any multiplying, so therefore my sign won't change. So let me see what happens here. I'll say 0 is greater than negative 1. I'm taking the negative 1 out, but I'm keeping it there. So now I'm going to be left with a 16t squared minus 1. Okay, all right. So no need to change the sign, no need to do anything funky. But now I got to look at this and say, well, can I factor this out? Well, sure I can. And if you notice, the 16t squared minus 1, that's a perfect square. And if it's a perfect square, I can very easily say this is actually negative 1 times what? The square root of 1 times, subtract the square root of the other. Remember that? So you have the 4t plus 1 times 4t minus 1. That's from when we were doing quadratics. Remember that, the perfect square. So now, what's interesting here is that I actually have 3 factors. If I count the negative 1, I've got 3 factors. So really, what am I trying to say? Well, I want whatever I got to be positive. It has to be positive. I need it to be positive. So, what can I say now? Well, I know this is negative, because it's negative. Which means, how do I get it to be positive? Well, I'm either going to multiply by this, by what? Hold on. I want this to be negative. What am I saying? This has to be less than 0. Oh my god, I almost made a huge mistake. This has to be negative. Why didn't you tell me? Okay, so then let's look at this again. This means it's got to be negative, which means this whole thing multiplied by 3 times has to be negative. So what times what times what gives me a negative number? Well, a negative times a negative times a negative gives me a negative. A negative times a positive times a positive gives me a negative. So there's my two cases. So I can do this now. I got case 1 and I got case 2. Case 1 is where each of those are negative. In other words, where this is less than 0. This has to be smaller than 0, so therefore it is negative. And also for t minus 1 has to be less than 0 as well. Okay, so then we got to solve for these things. So I'm going to move the 1 over. I got the 4t, so I'm going to divide by 4, and I'll be left with a t is less than negative 1/4. And on this side, I'm going to get t is less than what? It's going to become a positive 1 divided by 4. So there. All right. Cool. So now what do? I make my number line. That's what I do. So here we go. I'm going to have that. I'm going to have a negative 1/4. I'm going to have a positive 1/4. And now I'm going to start making my lines. Okay, so let's see. T is less than negative 1/4. Okay, so less than, that means I'm doing a circle, not a solid circle, because I don't count the quarter, the negative 1/4, and I go to the left. Is that right? T has to be less than it. Okay, yeah. And T has to be less than this as well. Okay, pretty obvious. T is what? T is going to be less than negative 1/4. Okay, so far so good. That's case 1. Case 2 is where I got a positive and a positive. So I'm going to have a 4t plus 1 is greater than 0. And I'm going to have a 4t minus 1 is greater than 0. And once again, I'm going to have a t. I already know what numbers I'm going to get because I already calculated all this. So it's going to be a greater than a negative 1/4. And this will be a t is greater than 1/4. What does this look like? All right, well, oops, sorry, I'm just choosing my color here. Get my line across now again. What does this look like? Okay, well, got my points again. Got a negative 1/4. Got a 1/4. And what do we end up with? I got a t is greater than 1/4, that way. And I got t is greater than a negative 1/4, and t is greater than 1/4. So once again, I got a solution of t is greater than 1/4. So I've got two parts to the solution, which kind of makes sense. When I was looking at that original graph, if we went back and looked at it, it'd be kind of obvious. There should be sort of, if I look at it, I got sort of, let's see, there's like the area here and the area here. There's sort of this little block of area here and a block of area here. So I am going to get some solutions that are going to be no good for me. The ones on the negative side are not going to work for me. But for now, I'm just going to look at everything and see what happens. So let's go back and solve now the second equation. So we got to go through this now. Okay. So bringing the 2 over, what do I got? I got 0 is less than negative 16 t squared. Now 2 off of 6, I get a 4. Once again, I got a negative in front of my t squared, not a problem. Just take that negative 1 out, and then I'm left with a 16 t squared minus 4, and I go hip hip hooray, I've got another perfect square. Awesome. So now I'm going to solve it. Okay, so z 0 is less than, I got my negative 1 still, but now I can break this up into its conjugates. I got 4t square root of 2 plus 2, and then 4t minus 2. So let's check it out again. What do we got? This is telling me that this whole thing has to be positive. All right, no problem. So that means I can have I got a negative, and it has to be multiplied by what? Well, I could multiply by a negative and then a positive. So the two negatives would give a positive, and multiply by positive, it would still be positive. And I would have to multiply by either a positive and a negative. There's my two possibilities. There's my two cases. So once again, got to do it. Case 1. Now this one's where the first one is negative. So 4t plus 2 has to be less than 0. And the 4t minus 2 has to be positive. So it has to be greater than 0. All right. Whew, a lot of work. So now I got t is going to be less than, what do I got? I bring the 2 over, that'll be a negative 2, and it'll be divided by 4. So a negative 2 divided by 4, that will give me a negative 1/2. And then this, I'll tell you right now, will give me a positive 1/2. Cool. All right, so what does that look like? Well, put them on a number line. Find out. Negative 1/2, positive 1/2. So what's this look like? Okay, so the t is less than a negative 1/2. All right, less than. All right, whatever you say. And how about this one? T is greater than a half. Oh, there's no solution here. This is not good. I don't want there to be no solution. Oh well, says there is. I gotta listen. Math says this is the way it is. Must listen to math. Okay, so what about the next one then? This is where the first one's positive and the next one's negative. Okay, so I'm going to have case 2. Hopefully I got enough room for it. 4t plus 2 is now positive, greater than 0. And 4t minus 2 is negative, so it's less than 0. So I'm going to get a t is greater than negative 1/2. And I'm going to get a t is less than a positive 1/2. That's what I'm going to work out. All right, number line time. Slap them down. Let's see what we got. Negative 1/2, and I got a 1/2. Oh, my writing's getting bad. Getting tired. We can do this. We can do this. Okay, so t is greater than a negative 1/2. And t is less than, oh, okay, there we go. Now we got something happening. Because here, t is between them. So t is greater than a negative 1/2 and smaller than a 1/2. Okay, so what do we got? What do we got? Let's, maybe if we combined all these together, we'd actually get something out of this. Okay, let's try it out. So we're going to make a massive number line, super number line. And I'm going to look at all this. Okay, so what do I got? I got a few things here. I've got, there's a negative 1/2. There's a negative 1/4. All right, cool. I got a positive 1/4. Positive 1/4. And I've got a positive 1/2. Cool. In fact, I'll even stick a 0 here. Look, 0 right there. Cool. So let's look at each of these in turn. Okay, so apart from the no solution, I've got 3 possible things here. So I've got t is less than negative 1/4. So that goes from here and down. All right. Then I got t is greater than 1/4. Now here's the, okay, I got to move this. I'm not going to be able to see this anymore. I'm going to move you over. Sorry guys, bear with me, we're doing this. Okay, so the question is, what about the last part? Okay, not so bad, not so bad. It means it's between, it doesn't include it, but it's between a 1/2, negative 1/2 and a 1/2. So where do I have everything doubled up? Right here and right here. So how do I say? So the solution, considering